Hi everyone, it's Talia from Zart Art, and today we're going to be exploring scratch-back textures and patterns. So today we're going to be using a scratch-back technique to explore a variety of different textures, different lines and different patterns. So what we're going to be using is some scratch card. So this scratch card has a black ink over the top, and when used with a sharp object such as these scratch back tools, underneath will reveal a white shiny surface. So to begin, you can look at the artist Beth Crombs. She's an American illustrator that has created many children's books, and her illustrative style really explores texture and that scratch-back technique. So you can have a look at some of her works to get a little bit of inspiration of how you can create texture with scratch-back. But to begin, we are going to choose a piece of scratch card. So this is around A5 size. You can cut down your card as big or as small as you like. And when we are exploring our textures, we're going to keep it refined to a very small area. So I've chosen to use a circular template, and I'm going to trace these circles around my scratch card and keep our individual textures that we're creating in those circular shapes. So I think I'm going to try a variety of different size circles, but if you've got something else, a different template with a different shape that you want to use, you can try that as well. Okay, so now I've drawn my different size circles onto my scratch card, and I've created pattern in there already just by the shapes of the circle. Now what I'm going to do is explore some of the different shapes of my scratch tools. So these scratch tools are really handy, and you can change the nib on the top as well to look at those different shapes. So for each individual circle, I'm going to try and create a different pattern or a different texture. So I'm going to use a combination of hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, using thick, thin lines, changing the direction of my line as well can create some really interesting textures. So through these circles, I'm going to try to keep each texture within that circle and changing the kinds of textures and lines that I'm creating in the other circles as I move along, and exploring the shapes of these tools as I do that as well. So to begin, I'm going to start with hatching. So I'm going to draw multiple straight lines close together just to create a really simple textured effect using just the top of this basic tool. So that will create a nice sharp line. So when you are using the scratch card, you don't have to press too hard. If you wanted to, you could use a ruler as well to create really nice straight lines. But if you are working on scratch card, be aware that you can't use wooden tools because the surface is too solid to scratch into with wood. So you do need something like these metal tools to create that scratch back effect. Okay, so I've just finished scratching my basic lines going across in a horizontal direction. So you don't have to put too much pressure into your tools as you are scratching, to just be aware that the tips can be quite sharp. So don't be doing anything silly with them, but you should be fine to work on a scratch board because you don't have to put too much pressure. Now I'm going to do some cross hatching, so doing my horizontal lines and then the vertical lines which will intercept, and that will create a different kind of texture. So I'm just going to change the shape of my tool. So this one will create even finer lines because that has a finer and sharper point. But I'm going to move to my next circle and continue on from there. So now you've got an idea of my hatching and cross hatching, and now I'm going to explore that same technique with these tools, and then I'm going to move on to some stippling and then working on some thicker and thinner lines, but you can explore a range of different textures. And if you're not feeling confident with the kinds of textures you can create, of course you can use a pencil to draw them on a piece of paper and then compare and contrast the differences between working with something like a scratch tool compared to a pencil, because it is quite a different experience. But now I'm going to move on to some more cross hatching and then creating some different patterns in the rest of my circles. Okay, so now I've finished scratching in some of my textures, and as you can see, I've experimented with thin lines, thicker lines, changing the direction of the line as well, and we've got a lot of different patterns and textures happening here. And like I said before, you can try out some of these textures and draw it with a pencil and then compare it to what it's like using some of these different scratch tools. But otherwise, I'm happy with how my textures have turned out, so I'm going to leave it there. But this is a really fun activity if you do want to experiment with line, shape, texture, and even creating some different kinds of patterns. You can use different shapes as your template. But if you wanted to extend this activity further, now that you've got an idea of how to use the tools and how to create those textures, you can look at Croms's work and create your own illustrations using a scratchback technique. But I would definitely recommend this activity. Could be good for any students from middle primary all the way to secondary school if they haven't used a medium like this before. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.